Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. There's so much going on, and I'm just so glad that you choose to spend this time with me and with my wonderful, wonderful circle of friends, family. There you go, the Santita Jackson Show, and we're all part of that same family. We've had so many occurrences. We'll be talking about so much today. Uh, the Charlie Kirk assassination, that there's so many layers to that. And then, of course, President Trump is still looking at deploying troops all over the country. Really, at this point, in blue cities, even in red states. And everyone was waiting on tenterhooks, if you will, to see what was going to happen with Chicago. Well, it turns out um, the president is standing down in Chicago. So, what does that mean? I want to know what you think of that. It was taking so long, this rollout was taking so long, Sheila Garland Olanaron. And I said, Ari Bloomkatz, executive editor in these times. Of course, you're from the Illinois Poor People's Campaign, Sheila. I said, well, okay. I'm wondering if he's having a think. Because when you see the governor who's threatening to sue the federal government, when you see the mayor of Chicago, both of these are two biggest officials really that we have in the state. You have the two senators, U.S. senators. You have clergy. You have all of these people who stood up and said, not in our town, not on our watch. I think the president had to think because they started thinking about posse comitatus, which was something. Uh, it's really a principle. It's law, but after the Civil War, it was decided that you would not have a deployment of troops on the ground to fight, to have Americans fighting Americans. And that was going to be a violation of that. But there were so many legal hurdles, and I think social hurdles too, constitutional hurdles, just so much that we hold dear as Americans was at stake. But now he's planning to go to Memphis. He said he'll put Chicago on the shelf for now, but I want to know what happened. What do you think happened? Why do you think that the president basically did a stand down on Chicago? And I have two brilliant people who will help us to unpack this because I think it's important and it could be a wonderful lesson that other people around the country might be able to, from which they could benefit. So meet me on Blue Sky, santitajackson.bsky.social. And of course, I'm on Facebook, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Like and share, like and share. Of course, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I'm on Instagram, Santita Jackson IG, and X at Santita J. I need you to help me with the algorithm. Progressive shows like mine get pushed down. And mine gets pushed down a lot. There was a time when I readily got several million views in a week's time. And that's been clogged up. And I need you to help us to get through the hump. So I need you to like and share the show. Like and share the show. We accumulate millions of views over a week or two. But what I need you to do is help us to speed that up and help us to help the algorithm along. So please do that. But as I make that appeal, please support In These Times magazine. It is a magazine that does a lot of great work. They tell our story. There's nothing like, they say history, right? Well, your story. How about that? Your story. A story from our perspective. When my father ran for president, he said, it's clear that I'm a black man. Yeah, I'm a candidate who was black, and I have the black experience. He said, but I want you to know that this campaign is coming from the black perspective, which doesn't mean it excludes anyone, but we're not coming from the mansion down. We're going from the manger up. That's what I love about In These Times. They explain America and the world from the bottom up, which is where we come from. So, as my handsome, handsome Ari Bloomkatz, who is the executive editor of In These Times, gets resettled, I want to hear from you, Sheila. What do you think happened here? I mean, because ICE has been deployed, Operation Midway, as he calls it, that has been deployed, and less loudly, I would say, not quite quietly, but certainly it hasn't been loud, but there have been lots of arrests of people who are not citizens. And I don't know where they are, but the deployment of the FBI and the federalizing of the police, the National Guard being put on our streets, that did not happen. What do you think happened? Chicago's got this storied history of activism, and we saw that. We saw so many people stepping forward. What do you make of it? Are you surprised, number one, that the Trump administration decided to stand down here in Chicago?
You know, first of all, it's really good to see you, Santita. It's been a while, and I know I've had a lot of things going on in my life, so it's really a pleasure to be here with you and Ari. I love In These Times, and have had some occasions to be at the offices there for events over the years. So it's a real pleasure to be on this call with you as well. So I think there are a couple of things that really strike me. One is this whole idea of being organized and being prepared. When Trump was elected the first time in my neck of the woods here in Chicago, community began to organize in preparation for what they anticipated the Trump administration was doing. And I think that requires a certain level of sort of understanding the political terrain and preparing accordingly. And after the election of Trump the second time, we on the north, just all the north side, because I live on the north side of Chicago, and I know this went on, some phases of this went on around the city, but I think it was really intense up here because, of course, we have Delia Ramirez, we had Carlos Anthony as our commissioner, Anthony Quezada, Rosana Rodriguez. We had a lot of really activist folks that came up from a movement on the north side who had enough political experience and political vision to begin to organize our broader community. And I know I left out some names. And we held an event right down the street from here at Roosevelt High School, where it was literally standing room only, where hundreds and hundreds of community fighters and activists came out and set up an agenda and created a community network that could begin to educate our neighbors and our fellow folks. And this, I think, is extended across the city. And of course, we see it developing across the state and the country. Because nobody is fooled by, the election, and I use that parenthetically, of someone like Trump, and what it actually means for our political life. And so I think because when you meet resistance with the level of organization that we have here in Chicago, it's very hard to overcome, no matter how people see it as this powerful force. Having regular, everyday working people come together and organize is formidable, which I know you're going to talk about this later, but which really sort of dovetails with the rhetoric coming out of the White House and all of these quote unquote rightist circles about the assassination of this Kirk character. And coming after the organized left and coming after organizations that really represent the kind of organization that can put up a fight and resistance. And so I think that was what stood him down. And also the fact that he would, I mean, escalate. I know he wants to have some kind of escalation or being at war for the upcoming elections so that he can either stop them or interfere with them. When you look at his overall, longer term political strategy, especially around elections and the things that he's doing. So, and it's forcing us to come up with ways to figure out how to organize and protect ourselves. And so I don't know how much, we have to be cautious. We have to be mindful. We have to continue to look at and to understand the terrain that he's operating from. I mean, the political agenda and where it's headed. But I think having this kind of organized resistance is absolutely vital and important. And also, I think the second thing that you mentioned earlier, Santita, is having a governor and a mayor who were not going to back down. Mm-hmm. They weren't going to negotiate with this kind of craziness. And you could see him testing the waters publicly, Trump, that is. If Pritzker would call me and this and that, and the narrative that developed, really trying to drum up some support on his agenda. But there was none forthcoming that was legitimate. And so I have never been more proud of living in Illinois and Chicago than I was over these past several weeks. Seeing our elected officials who have this foundation. I mean, Brandon Johnson was indeed an organizer,
Mhm.
and seeing that put into play, it's a resistance that's hard to crack into. So I think that's part of it. And then I think they're going to have to go back. I mean, I've been involved in many organizing campaigns over my life.
Mhm.
And what we always know is that the quote unquote the boss will make serious mistakes that will lose them the campaign. And I think that they have to be mindful of the mistakes that they're going to make that could conceivably lose the campaign, and they have to take a step back. But what are they going to be running toward politically in the next round? Because there will be more rounds of engagement over the next few years with this administration. Really trying to break down any sort of organized resistance. My concern is that they're going to start digging really deep into organizations, into groupings, into people. And we see this historically with the emergence and the development of fascism, historically in Europe and Germany, Japan and places. We see the playbook to a certain extent. So I think right now we're dealing with a level of authoritarianism that is definitely setting people on edge and making us think about what's in the future. But when we actually get to where they set up a fascist state, it's going to be, I think, qualitatively different than what we're experiencing now. Right now, we're seeing its emergence, and whether that comes into full fruition. Um, I think there are a lot of factors that have come into play, but squashing any resistance is going to be necessary to establish a fascist state. And seeing the development and emergence of leadership in various places that have been silent or dormant or disconnected from the movements from the ground up, beginning to figure out how to reorganize themselves. I'm heartened by the things that's happening in the UK with the Jeremy Corbyn and the development of an independent political movement. These are things that the fascist movement is going to have to try to fight and destroy. But it gives us a little breathing space, I think, to figure out how we can develop and come out of our silos. That's a whole other discussion, I
No,
think.
but I think it's all part of it, the same discussion,
Yeah.
because you know we've seen this before. When I say we've seen this before, I think having grown up in the civil rights space, my parents, people talk about marching with Dr. King. My parents were his staff members. So growing up under, uh, when I was a child, Ari, this might have been before you were born. The FBI had a TV show that came on Sunday nights, and it was extremely popular. But as a child, as a little girl, I knew that they were involved in Dr. King's assassination, um, Fred Hampton's assassination. They were not heroes in my space. They were people, we had already stepped through the looking glass. Uh, we'd lived under fascism. With J. Edgar Hoover, we saw the fascist elements of our government come into play. And I think, we have to be mindful, as Sheila helps us to see, we've been here. And this is where we are. The question is, you know, what have we learned here? Because I think, Chicago's a different kind of beast. Um, when you look at the turn of the last century, the labor movements, the pushing, the pulling, Dr. King really trying to come here, Reverend being left here to organize and organizing very successfully. So, knowing that you had to pull together the ministers, because that was something that Dr. King had a hard time doing, because the ministers, when he got here, they cheered him from afar, but when he got to Chicago, they'd been bought off by the machine. So it was like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. When they got here, they treated him horribly, and Reverend had to make his way through that, and other progressives had to make their way through that. So I mean, so tell me what it is that you see, because I think this is extraordinary. Sheila, I think you made the point. What having pushing President Trump back, excuse me, and Palantir, because he doesn't come alone. He is. It's the technocrats. I mean, Peter Thiel is a fascist. I mean, and these are the people who he's standing for. I
Yeah.
mean, they're surveilling us. I was when Charlie Kirk was killed. I got messages from people. Not only have they locked down all of these black schools because our kids were being threatened, but they were saying you can't mention Charlie Kirk unless you speak of him affirmatively. Otherwise, you'll be doxxed. So here we are. So what do you? I mean, in this moment, particularly within these times in your history, this is what you cover. What did you see?
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Santita. Great to be on the show, and Sheila, great to be on with you as well. And um, really appreciated your comments a lot, Sheila, particularly around some of the like formations and historical formations that are like used to set the grounds for this here. I've only been in Chicago for 2 years. So relative to both of y'all, I'm still very much a newcomer. But one of the things that I knew about Chicago before I got here, but has been such both like a joy and fantastically interesting and fascinating since I've arrived here and started to live here, has been how special Chicago is, particularly on the forefront of organizing. If we look at the CTU in 2012, for example, Chicago changed the world, the absolute world with the strike in 2012. And it wasn't just the CTU. There were a number of actions actually that year that came out of Chicago that absolutely transformed the world, transformed how we think about healthcare, transformed how we think about education, transformed how we think about economics. This is the city that actually, while it sprouted, the neoliberal movement in economics also defeated it with the election of Brandon Johnson. We see actually sort of this arc coming, attacking, overcoming the neoliberal sort of like status quo that we've had here as well. And so Chicago is absolutely special and on the forefront. I think you're absolutely right that the model that has emerged here can be a model that others can emulate as well. And a lot of it, I think we can see around labor and around people who have been like organizers within labor and working with working people every day for many, many years. This sort of really sort of monumental tectonic shift in Trump actually coming to attack the city of Chicago and the resistance that has emerged is absolutely incredible. But one thing I think is also really important is that even though Trump may be sending the National Guard to Memphis now, one, that is absolutely horrifying that he's sending it to Memphis. He's attacking black mayors and black cities. That's very, very clear. But the other is that the ICE escalation, what they're calling Operation Midway Blitz, is still very much active. Right now, we saw the shooting of a 38-year-old father, undocumented father, and then we also saw on the same time on Friday the arrest of a undocumented laborer who was actually involved in a lawsuit against Home Depot and against off-duty police officers. And if we remember, Home Depot and its owner are actually one of the larger funders for Donald Trump as well. Right. And so we see what appears to be some like real targeting of like labor at the same time that this is going on. And also, of course, the attack on working people and undocumented folks is fundamentally an attack on labor as well. But we have seen this incredible resistance. We've seen organizing in every corner of Chicago. We have seen real leadership from Brandon Johnson, Delia Ramirez, Roxana, Sheila, as you've said as well, and Governor Pritzker here too. What I think we've also seen is that lots of the rehearsals of organizing have also played out here. So there was this idea that after all of this organizing around Palestine, which is also still ongoing, that folks would be so overly exhausted that we wouldn't actually be able to resist Trump, right? That actually hasn't happened. And one of the reasons that hasn't happened is because a lot of the organizing around Palestine has actually brought our movements closer together. They have not actually done what many feared and separated us apart, but it has actually largely brought many of our movements together. And that is something that has been like really special. So we see coalitions that have emerged, both in labor and elsewhere, that are similar coalitions to the ones we saw actually emerging around Palestine too. So, for example, I can see the Mayday Strong coalition that emerged out of labor, right? That also really is setting the foregrounds for the Labor Day Strong that we saw movement. All of these things, every single one of them, the things that we feel as organizers are often fails on our part, are all rehearsals for these sorts of really monumental moments in which real change can happen. And that's what we saw here in Chicago, is a real absolute refutation of the Donald Trump agenda and the fascist agenda.
And I just wanted to add to, I think, you're hitting on a lot of really good points, Santita. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I do want to say that we are in for a very protracted period of struggle, that we're at the very beginning, I think, of a movements actually coming out of their silos, while at the same time, just because of the way government and our society is constructed forces us into our silos. But the fact that we've seen this unified sort of organized resistance, forcing people, like you said, the Palestinian movement, the protecting our community, against these ICE attacks, they have very, probabilities or chances for being deeply siloed, but we actually saw those silos broken so that we could have this organized resistance. And I think from that perspective, from a political perspective, I think that's probably what frightened, because frightened the Trump administration from coming to Chicago, because the more they push, the more we come out of our silos. And when we have an organized movement of resistance, there's a greater probability that we can actually win the bigger struggle for our generation and the generation to come. And that is that we have to, like you said, not just neoliberalism, but the structures that control our society are deadly. And they're built on this technology that is going to continue to, we see that's part of the cornerstone of Trump's administration is making a pathway of no resistance, no regulation, nothing around this AI, this technology that is massively displacing all workers. And the answer is, if you're pushing these people out of the country and the argument is that they're needed in the production equation, the reality is that we look in meat packing, we look in farming, a lot of these folks are being replaced by technology that's a lot more sophisticated than what we saw in the 1920s and 30s, that was in large part at the heart of the whole exodus of the African American community out of the South. Technology is an impetus historically that changes how societies are organized and structured. And so in order to have this level of technology that's gobbling up land, that's displacing people, destroying our water, you have to have, I think you have to have the ability to push people in a way into their silos. And they understand this better than we do. They understand history better than we do, because there's been, since even before the Reagan administration, this whole push on destroying public education. I think Reagan said something to the effect of having an educated proletariat is dangerous. Mm-hmm. And so if you have an uneducated proletariat, they can't figure out how to unite enough to throw off the yoke of capitalism and these oligarchs and all this other kind of stuff. So the point that I was trying to make is, what they need is, they don't need us as workers anymore. When you have a technology that permanently displaces people, what do you do with them? And so, having this narrative of division that, these people are taking your jobs. Ain't none of us got jobs. We don't have jobs that pay anything. We can't pay the housing, can't go into the grocery store, and buy what you need. And so our relationship to the means of production is certainly shifting, and they have to shift accordingly. And so I do think that, that we're in for some protracted struggle as people begin to understand. There was some, I think some of the Proud Boys, some of this Charlie Kirk people showed up in Belleville, Illinois. I was on the phone with some folks from the Illinois Poor People's Campaign down there, and they're really trying to make examples out of people who want to resist. Obviously, we do need to get organized. People need to figure out where they can go to be organized and to also be safe, because anything that we do now from the quote unquote left or from the progressives is going to be legally, we're going to be legally attacked with the prison system, the police system, all these places that can silence us, imprison us. It's going to become federal offense. So we obviously need to be smart. But if you begin to understand the foundations of why this is happening and what they need, what do they need?
Well,
And
but
if they
Sheila,
don't, then what is our purpose? How do we organize in order to survive this period?
well, we have to pay attention to what everybody's saying. Anytime the lead intellectual of the World Economic Forum says that we talks about useless eaters,
Yeah,
and that we will own nothing and we'll like it, and
yeah,
that the world is overpopulated. These people are saying a lot of things that are they're dystopian. It's hard to believe it, but let's be very clear. It's very real, And I'm sorry, Ari, you were going to say?
Oh, no, no. So I just, one of the things that you and Sheila are making me think of here is just, how we're thinking about violence, how we're thinking about crime, right? So Trump comes into all of these things saying, like, we're going to Chicago because crime is like so rampant, right? When crime has actually been largely down, and same with like other cities as well, and how we're thinking about violence. And one of the things we know about fascism is that it breeds on violence and it breeds on otherism. And we know also that Trump has been failing. We know that largely the Trump agenda, especially internationally with regards to tariffs, with regards to all sorts of trade, Trump is absolutely failing. So what is he doing? He's trying to pick wars all over the place. Let's go to war in Greenland. We'll take over Greenland. Let's go to Panama. We'll take over the Panama Canal. And largely the globe is saying, no, you got to go back and hang out in the United States. We don't want anything to do with you, right? We've got this sort of like new Monroe doctrine popping up where folks are like, Trump, your sphere of influence right now does not affect any of us. Please go away on this. And Trump's trying to hold on to what power he can. So what does he do? He can't go to war anywhere else. He'll go to war here. Right. And that's actually what he's largely doing. And when he's talking about crime and going to war against crime, what he's doing is sending a mass criminal organization into our cities to allegedly solve crime. Right. And this is like how we're thinking about things. And one of the things that I think is happening, and happened here in Chicago and throughout Illinois, is that people aren't buying it anymore. We saw what happened in Los Angeles. People didn't buy it after Los Angeles. We saw Trump trying to come out of DC and claim victory like out of DC. People aren't buying it. They see it when he's into our communities. He's claiming that we are these horrible, places, similar to almost how he was calling, Haiti and these other countries like shithole countries. He does that here as well, always targeting black cities, black mayors in general, like across of it. And people are no longer buying it. It is not happening. And this is what Trump is like beginning to realize, that if he had actually come into Chicago, it would have been so politically problematic, like for him, that people are no longer buying it. We do not want this in our communities. We do not want mass criminal organizations in our communities.
Well, Tio Hardeman, violence interrupters, you're the part of the reason that he said he was coming, because there's so much violence here. This place is just, did he call it a hellhole? Oh my word. He said so many awful things, but Ari and Sheila and Tio, it fits into this larger narrative of why we need to be surveilled so heavily, and tracked. We're getting social credit scores. They're just not calling them that, but that's what the doxing and all of that is about. What did you make of the president's just standing down in Chicago, at least in part, because we still do have Operation Midway, where ICE is on the streets, taking people in. So what did you make of him deciding to go to Memphis instead of coming to Chicago full throttle?
Well, I think for the first time since President Trump has been in office, he met his match here in regards to trying to deploy the National Guard in Chicago. You know, the governor spoke out against it. A lot of people spoke out against it. The mayor spoke out against it. So I think he changed his mind, because what would have happened, and unfortunately, this may have happened, if the National Guard had been deployed in Chicago, it may have been mass demonstrations. It could have led to some issues with the National Guard and some of the people in Chicago, possibly. I'm not saying it should be that way, but you never know. People are really upset. But see, the thing about it is, as a leader, I just want to say this, as the governor, the mayor, or the president, I believe that a survey or a poll should have been conducted with about maybe 50,000 people. So if 50,000 people, 80% of them said, bring the National Guard, then you make a decision. But if you got 80% that 80% of the people that are against it, then that's another pathway you have to take. Chicago, now I have to be clear with all the listeners here, Santita. Chicago homicides are down, but per community, the numbers are staggering, okay? Like the Austin area, you got almost 80 to 90 people per 100,000 people that are shot or killed in the Austin community. East Garfield, West Garfield, the numbers are similar. So even though the national rate is 5 or 6 people per 100,000, but the local rate in some of these communities, is off the charts. So we have to be clear about that. And this has been taking place for decades. So it's not really like a situation where it happened overnight. So with Donald Trump and the National Guard, it would have been a temporary fix anyway. You talking about deploying the National Guard for a week or two, temporary fix. Homicides already on the decline. So he would like to just take credit, like Ari, I think Ari is the name there. Get your name right. I want to make sure. All right. Homicides on a decline anyway throughout the nation in some of these cities, right? Now, when you talk about deploying the National Guard, what about deploying the National Guard when you have some of these mass shooters out here to try to, like basically prevent some mass shootings from taking place, right? So he's not thinking about deploying the National Guard then. If that's the case, we should have deployed the National Guard way before its time, 30 years ago in Chicago, because we had some times in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we had over 1,000 murders in Chicago in one of those years during the decade of the 80s and the 90s. So we have a lot of systemic issues taking place out here.
But to your point, they never deploy them with white kids.
Exactly, that's my point.
Which is where these, I mean, I'm just underscoring your point.
Yeah, I know.
Which is where who walks into a high school and decides to shoot everybody?
Right.
It's not even a thought. The day that Charlie Kirk was killed, at the same time, there was a mass shooting. And no one's talking about that in Colorado again.
Yes, right in Colorado. For sure.
I'm wondering, in a civilian society, do we want to use the military to resolve our issues? That was something that Dwight Eisenhower said, that is not what we need to do. We don't have the wraparound services. We need you. We need violent interrupters. We need people who are deployed into the community who talk to people who are in trouble.
Always.
I think we're going down a dangerous path. I just personally believed, Ari, I'm mindful of your time restrictions today, Ari, that I worry about the path of that we're going down when the military is the answer in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really scary thing. I mean, also, I'm curious, Tio and Sheila, also like what you think. Brandon Johnson has talked, a couple times throughout this about how much funding he feels like has been cut or withheld from Chicago around violence prevention efforts as well. And so, part of me thinks like, well, maybe before you think about sending the military, maybe send the money that like we're owed, so that we can actually do a lot of the work that like we need to do here. Like, this is not like a situation in which sending like troops is actually going to be helpful. And it's hard for me to actually think of many times other than perhaps like some national disaster work and things like that, in which sending the National Guard into situations like this has been a net positive for really anybody ever. Right? Like in situations like this, what we're really talking about is so transparent, particularly in terms of history around Chicago. We're talking about attacks on Black and brown people right around Mexican Independence Day. We've seen this before. I haven't, because again, I'm a newcomer here, but this has happened in Chicago actually several times when Operation Wetback in, I believe, 1954 established a entire operation here in Chicago right around September 16th, Mexican Independence Day. We saw Trump in Operation Midway Blitz actually launch right now around Mexican Independence Day, right after the first event in Pilsen had occurred, like, as well. And so we've seen what happens when you militarize communities in the United States. And what happens is you go in and you attack and you deport. I believe in 54, it was like, what was it, like 500,000 people from like our communities. This is done often during like periods of down economic growth, and often to distract things. But deporting like our neighbors is not the answer. Driving our neighbors to go away, who are actually paying taxes through sales tax constantly, who are contributing to society, who are working jobs throughout that are really helpful. Deporting these folks from our communities is not helpful for anybody. It's not helpful for reducing violence. It's not helpful for reducing any sort of economic strife that's happening as well at the same time. It does not help. So if you can show me where a military intervention in the United States in situations like this has actually been really a net positive, that it hasn't resulted in more violence, more death, more deportation, more attacks, more racial profiling, I'd love to hear it. But like, I think that the best case scenario for the National Guard is we need you on natural disasters. Please stay out of attacking our communities and attacking our cities, because that's what you're coming to do. You're not coming to keep us safe. You're coming actually here with the National Guard and ICE to cause violence. And we've seen that. And within a week of Operation Midway Blitz, we've already seen the shooting of an unarmed father in one of our communities here as well. And if you've seen the videos from this, it is abhorrent.
It's chilling. It is
absolutely abhorrent.
And they just lied about what actually took place. I mean, it was just a straight up lie. But I'm glad that you mentioned history, Ari, because, I mean, if you think about it, you know, the history of this country has been one that has been fraught with the use of terror, extra legal terror, from almost its inception to create, you know, the groundswell for the development of these oligarchs and the absolute sort of rabid consumption of and destruction of not only all of our public spaces, but the people that live in this country, have come to this country. And, you know, I've been rereading Democracy in Chains, you know, because it really lays the ground basis for, you know, what these folks are after since almost the inception of this country. That it's the oligarchs, the wealthy, who are owed, you know, the complete and entire control of what they say they founded. And it's rooted in, you know, this extraordinarily divisive language and use of military. Think about, what was it, 1910, when the military was called out to bomb the folks in Virginia, West Virginia, the battle for Blair Mountain. These were white folks predominantly that were bombed by the US government because they wanted to improve their living conditions working in these mines. Look at Philadelphia. They were bombed.
Look at Tulsa. The first time we dropped a bomb on American soil was on those Black people in Tulsa.
Exactly. And I was getting to that. I mean, yeah. I mean, so the use of this kind of terror and force in order to, for the oligarchs and the wealthy to push their agenda of absolute control of the political domain in this country is historic. And so they're using things from the playbook, or at least attempting to. We're in a different era right now. And I think we've been talking about, you know, what is at the root of this? And I think we're looking at, I mean, economists are predicting a worldwide economic crisis, you know, that's going to plunge us into a position that many of us have not lived through. I mean, some people, you know, the silent generation through the depression, and we've had periods of depression back and forth, but that's going to compound this sort of political layer that we're experiencing right now.
But
and
Sheila, hold on.
Do you control. Oh, let me just finish my
no,
thought.
no. But I want to stop you right here because you're saying something that I think needs to be amplified.
Okay.
Do you think we understand this moment in which we find ourselves? Because I don't get the sense that we understand
Oh,
what is happening to us globally and what is happening with the economic system. That's why I stopped you. I only stopped you as the host
yeah.
because just sometimes you say things you don't hear yourself, and I don't want to run past these
Right.
big points
Yeah.
because we don't understand how heavily we are surveilled, how
Mm.
heavily we are controlled,
Yeah.
how heavily the message. I mean, and so when every Ed Snowden was right, he said you're being watched all the time.
Yeah.
They take your digital footprint all the time. We look at China and say you're giving you a social credit score. That's happening here.
Yeah.
And so what you were saying, I just want to amplify it because
Yeah.
I think that's a very big point that a lot of us are not talking about.
Right. I mean, I think it is a huge point. I think that it's difficult for people to fathom just how onerous things are going to become. I mean,
Mm.
we're on I mean, we're in it. A lot of people are experiencing because we have so much poverty in this country and around the globe. So a lot of people are already living it, but the folks that think that they're not experiencing it, it's coming for us, and very soon, by next year or even sooner, we're going to see a real downturn, significant downturn. Prices are creeping up. And this is global. This is not just the United States, but the United States under this administration is certainly intensifying this global economic potential collapse.
But Sheila, to your point, the Pentagon, the Washington Post reported on the Pentagon memo that said that these troops are being deployed to quell unrest that will ensue because of this economic tsunami that's coming our way.
Yeah.
And we've had $1 trillion cut
Yeah.
to our healthcare system.
Yeah.
And they're expecting to lose at least 50,000 people a year, at least. That's
Well,
a whole lot of
right.
people.
I mean, our recent reports from the National Poor People's Campaign a few years ago said that 400 people a day, 400 people a day in this country die from causes that are directly connected to poverty. And, we're talking about, probably tripling that number. I mean, I just want, just as an aside, like we were going to get our COVID shots, and the survey that we had to fill out, it was mandatory in order to just get the COVID shot was onerous. And if you don't have access to the internet, or if you don't really understand what's going on and the kind of fear tactics that go into that, and this rhetoric around how this COVID shot is somehow going to cause you to die, in reality, it's in many respects, it can save your life from being so sick from COVID. But the point that I'm trying to make is that all of this rhetoric is moving toward this idea that, we have all these people that we're not going to be able to employ, that they're going to be unmanageable and unruly if they can't eat. What are people going to do if they cannot feed themselves and their families? I don't know.
Sheila,
Nobody's going to sit around and be hungry.
but Sheila, no, they're not. But that's
No.
my point. But I want to bring Tio back in to the point that when they keep saying that the world is overpopulated,
Yeah,
I think we need to listen to what people are saying. And even when it comes to body autonomy, because I understood what people were saying about shots, because if they're pulling your health care from you on one hand, but they say we want to save your life on another, I'm like, no, you don't, because you don't want to give me health care. Right. So, and it's unscientific to resist the questions that people have. You answer the questions. It science begs questions. And that's why you have researchers who are constantly turning things over, and then they find out, what I thought was not necessarily true. And so there's nothing wrong with that. And we have made asking questions in the scientific realm, anywhere. We've almost outlawed that. And that to me is fascist. And that is really dangerous, because we're not We're not given the space that I think free people are supposed to have. Tio, as a
Yeah.
violence interrupter, as someone who is on the ground, diffusing um, these these conflagrations that can become statistics, that can become crimes, right? What do you want to see now going forward? Because the president is saying that, okay, occupying Chicago, coming to Chicago is still on the table, and it's on the table because of what Sheila just said. because because people are not going to eat. And if you think that people are going to walk around and not and starve, we are mistaken. That's not going
For
to happen.
sure. Well,
And
you know,
they're not going to see you eat
yeah.
while they starve. That's not going to
No,
happen.
for sure, because even electricity bills have gone up. I looked at my, I usually pay around 120 a month. Now it's $252 a month because of the tariffs, I believe, on Canada, whatever the case may be.
That's a
That
lot.
it kind of doubled on me. We had to pay more for electricity. But the thing is this here, people not gonna sit around and watch you live high on the hog while they're suffering out here. It happens all the time. And then I want to say this here because you got everybody that wants to do. I just want to a blast from the past. Remember the Rwanda genocide,
Oh
Santita?
yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
some of the findings from the Rwanda genocide with some of the German and French archaeologists and some of these people that study, cultures, they actually, the different tribes of Rwanda were getting along fine. The Hutu, Tutsis, and Tuwa tribe, they were getting along fine until these German archaeologists came over there and they began to experiment with the skulls of some of the people from Rwanda, and they put them into these three different type of tribal settings, which led to an issue because the Hutu people were the majority in Rwanda, the Tutsis were like the minority, and it
Mhm.
led to a massive genocide. The Hutu people waged war on the Tutsi people, all based on the fact that they were divided by some archaeologists and people, anthropologists type people. That's the word I was looking for. They studied the people and divided them people. It came down to that. And once I looked at some of the research on it, the German people was like, the German anthropologists were saying they don't even know why they conducted the experiment. You know what I mean? So, and the reason I'm bringing up experiments now is because you have a lot of experiments taking place. Donald Trump was really he kind of like, to me, he shoots from the hip. He wants it, whatever he wakes up to, and whatever he thinks about during the middle of the night, that's what he moves on. You have a guy that's working off a poor impulse control, without a doubt. Okay.
But Tio, the
Yeah.
president is not is that you're not allowed to do that.
No, you
We
shouldn't be
have
allowed to do it, right?
no, you're not. Because they'll get you out of there. If you decide you want to stop a war, they'll take you out. We know that.
Okay.
So that doesn't work like that. We're so captivated by his personality, which is so big and he's so charismatic that we're not looking at the people behind him.
Okay.
I mean, and the people who are behind him are running the show.
That's
They
fair.
put
That's fair.
JD Vance on the ticket.
Oh, very
Stop,
dangerous.
take him out of your mouth because he is not the point. The
Right.
point is these young people who
Yeah.
are surveilling us, the young people who, when you start, what the word goes out when this assassination took place last week. If you mention him in anything other than laudatory terms, you'll get doxxed.
Mhm.
I mean, we have to look at what, Ed Snowden was trying to tell us something, but we're not listening. And so I think that it was in that context that I was so proud of J.B. Pritzker, and especially our mayor, who has been under enormous pressure because he did not handle a problem that was dropped in his lap, a challenge, because he decided to treat some people humanely.
Mhm.
He has not had any space. And with that pressure, with very, very low approval numbers, and with a government that threatens people, quite frankly, right now, he just said, you know what? Not in my city. They're blocking off all these entrances. He was not playing. And I think there's something to be said for that, Tio. But now I think that what should the ask be? We got about 4 or 5 minutes
Well,
left
it's
here.
all about resources, Santita. We
Okay.
need the president cut off all the federal resources for violence prevention initiatives, and the violence prevention programs and the violence prevention public health approaches are getting results now. It's like it's documented that the programs are working in cities all across the United States. He should kind of let the funding go so people can continue their good work, mediating conflicts, working with young men and women, helping them think on a higher level, helping them secure alternative schooling, helping them actually can you hear me, Santita?
Absolutely,
Sorry
yes.
about that. Yeah. So this would happen, helping people learn how to become productive members of society. And most important, we're out here helping people deal with their trauma because hurt people hurt other people. We're doing our best to be like a safety network catch basin for young men and women. And we're working all over the place. We have about four, not just Violence Interrupters. We have a lot of organizations working in Chicago and throughout our nation, but we have about 400 staff in Chicago, and we've mediated almost not just Violence Interrupters, almost about maybe 150 some conflicts this year already compared to last year, and homicides are down. We're not going to take all the credit. The police are doing their job, and we still have to do a better job at intercepting the illegal gun trafficking, though, all right? There are too many automatic weapons in Chicago. I'm talking about way too many. But if you ask me what can we do next, Donald Trump should release the funding through the Department of Justice and help these programs continue to, work out here with everybody, Santita.
Sheila Garland, Alana,
Yes.
what do you want? I mean, as we begin to close out, and I want to let everyone know, we're going to have an IDF conscientious objector, Atalia Ben Abba. She will be on with us in a couple of hours, and she's in the United States, and she's making her case. Young, beautiful young woman, and she's going to explain her story. She's going to share her story, how she came to be a conscientious objector in Israel, and we certainly welcome her into our family on this show. I'm looking forward to having her.
Yeah.
But
Well, is that today? Is that going to be another show
at 5:00?
at 5:00?
I'll send you a link. Yeah.
Okay, I have to tune into that on Facebook.
Yeah, because I'm going to give her the space to tell her story.
Yeah.
Because we need to hear it.
Yeah, of course. Santita, I mean, I think I'm so appreciative of this platform because, it really allows us to look at things from a broader political perspective as opposed to just being very localized and narrow, which is important. I'm not suggesting that that's not important. But I think in the larger scheme of things, the way that we're going to solve these local issues is that we have to resolve the broader issues that are a result of, or not just a result of, but that is a feature of the sort of system of exchange that we live in today under capitalism, let's be clear. And we cannot resolve these issues with the same kinds of responses and reactions. It worked for a while, but like we said before, those relationships are being forever changed by this technology. This technology has to have space to grow. It doesn't need people. I mean, one of the things that the meatpacking industry said is that they're going to basically eliminate people from the process of production in meat production. What does that say? I mean, so if you have the technology that can permanently replace workers, we're in a very difficult space if we want to continue to eat and live and have access to healthcare and clean water and air and all these things. So that means we have a bigger fight on our hands. It's not just local, although the local fights are important, but it really makes us think about how do we begin to unite ourselves, who are the majority in this country, and really figure out what we need to do in order to move forward. Poverty is going to increase. People are going to be pushed into poverty because the jobs just aren't going to be there for us. And also the cost of just living. I remember back in the 90s, I always tell the story that I grew up in Flint, Michigan. When I go to Flint, it is not the same as it was when I was younger. And I remember distinctly the first time a robotic arm was brought into the Buick plant. Literally the next day, 400 workers hit the streets. There were 26 auto plants in Flint alone. You know how many there are today? One. Wow. There were 100,000 people engaged in auto production. There are less than 10,000, but not one single automobile less is being produced.
And that is a plan.
But people have to understand, if the
Yeah.
foundation, the economic foundation
Yeah.
is shifting, then that means our political understanding of what is happening must shift as well. This is not something that's going to be resolved piece by piece. We've got to figure out how to come together in a politically independent movement that prioritizes workers and what we need, as opposed to the needs of these oligarchs and the wealthy. What they need is not what we need.
But
What we need is, we need to be able to live, to eat, to drink, to have health care, to live with some measure of dignity. And I'm going to say this one last thing, because if we can't see it's hard to see the bigger picture, because we are forced to be localized. But I will say this, we have to have a society that's going to allow us to develop as human beings, so that we can see we're not human yet. We don't see each other's humanity. And if we don't have the foundation and the way our society is organized for us to really develop as human beings, we will destroy each other. And yeah.
And no, I'm sorry, I'm running out because I've got,
yeah, for sure.
another segment. But no, but that is the point. And that is why I interrupt. I interrupt everybody on this show when there is a point that needs to be amplified, because that's what this platform is for. A lot of these platforms that to which we have so much access, they don't talk about being human. They don't talk about, you know what? My utilities bill doubled in a month, and it's going to double again and again and again and again, because these people feel that the world is overpopulated and that healthcare is a privilege. It is not a right.
Exactly.
Education is a privilege. Living is a privilege. It is not your right.
Speak on it. Speak on it.
And so at the end of the day, we have some work to do. And that is why I just want you to know that sometimes we say things that are really profound, and we need to, I have to stop you and say, wait a minute. I want other people to hear what I just heard, because no one's talking about everyone having a right to the tree of life. How can we get your book, Tio?
Yeah, on Amazon, Interrupting Gun Violence, the Public Health Approach. You can go to Amazon and the book is right there.
And we need that more than ever. The president can take that book, because if you really want to lower crime, if you want to lower the temperature out here, speak to Tio Hardiman, because this is what he does. Speak to Sheila. This is what they do. Speak to Ari. He tells these stories. This is very important. Please support In These Times magazine. We need you to support them as they support us. We need you to get Tio Hardiman's books on Amazon, because you need to understand how to interrupt violence, period. Because you know what? There's gun violence and there's verbal violence.
Yes.
Just stop. Because a gun, you got to take many steps before you get to a gun. We can be very mean to each other, everybody.
Absolutely.
No, we've got to stop. And so I'm moving on over to talk about Charlie Kirk. And the president did not give a unifying message. He said it's the left's fault. Actually, it was not. And there's a whole lot that's going there. There's a lot to peel on that onion.
Yeah.
This young man's death. 31 years of age. Whatever you felt about his politics as a human being, I felt it was tragic. His wife was there. She saw that. And that to me is that's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing. Whatever his politics were, he said things that were abhorrent to me. But I never want to see that happen to anyone.
Yeah.
I never want to see that happen to anyone. She is without his wife is without him, and his children are without him. But it happens in Gaza every day. It happens in Sudan every day. It happens in Haiti every day. It happens in Appalachia every day. It happens in the Mississippi Delta every day. Everybody, spread that empathy around. Empathy belongs to everybody.
It belongs to everybody.
Come on, everybody. Sheila Garland, Olana Ron, Illinois Poor People's Campaign, but join the Poor People's Campaign. Tio Hardiman, Violence Interrupters, he needs your support. Sending you much love, everybody.
Thank you, Santita. All right.
Sending you much love. I'll send you the link.
All right, peace, everybody. Thank you, Santita. See you later.
Bye.
AM 950 Radio, everybody. The voice of progressive Minnesota.